Mike Bernard joins us for Inside the Numbers this Friday morning. Mike, how are we doing?
Doing well, Coach. How about yourself?
Well, I'm doing really good. Just ready to ready to get. I hate to say this, sounds like a complainer, but ready to get these non-meaningful bowls behind us, so we can actually get to some real things tomorrow.
Well, in today's standards, there's only two meaningful bowls, the
I I
semi-playoff games.
I agree, and that's why I advocate for the 16 team playoff because now, well, we have eight, and then we have four, and then we have two, and then we have one meaningful bowl game, and instead of just really three, the two semifinals and the national championship game, because it's gotten to the point where first of all, if you look at the crowds, no one is going. Absolutely, no one is going to a bowl. You look and it's spring games are drawing more crowds than some of these bowl games are.
Yeah, and the Sugar Bowl, you can get tickets for $10, $20.
Hmm.
Face value, they're hundreds, I guess.
Yeah,
And if it's not in a playoff game and if it's not a certain fit for a school that has a big following, you're right. The attendance is way down. And one thing that the playoffs will do when you go to 12 and maybe beyond is it should reduce the opt-outs, and it's not going to reduce the players that want to go on to the NFL. But I think some of those, are, instead of opting out of the bowl game, will go ahead and play.
I agree with you. They will, and depending upon what happens today, we could have 12 bowl teams finish the season at below 500. Now, I remember, and again, I'm the grumpy old man, but I remember back in the day where there were teams that were winning 8 games that got shut out of the bowl season,
Yeah,
and now basically, if you've got enough players that you can field a team, well, they'll give you a bowl game.
yeah. The other day we had Central Michigan was one of the teams in the bowl game. It's too early in the morning to think of the other at this time. It'll come to me. But they ranked, there's 131 1A teams or FBS teams.
Right.
They ranked 136 and 141.
Yeah.
So that means that the 1AA teams, several of them were ranked ahead of those two. They got to play indoors in a bowl game and get rewarded with, oh, it was New Mexico State.
Yeah.
New
Hmm.
Mexico State and Bowling Green. So those teams came in at 6-6, and they power ranked worse than all 131 teams.
Yeah. Yeah, the North Dakota states and the South Dakotas states and probably even the Jacksonville states would easily take care of those teams.
Yeah, they would wipe the field with those two.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about the Gator Bowl, South Carolina and Notre Dame. This is going to be a 3:30 kickoff today on ESPN. Both these teams coming in at 8-4. First time they've met in almost 40 years, and South Carolina won that matchup 36-32. Tyler Buchner injured in the week 2 for the for the Irish, and but he's kind of recovered rather quickly from his injury. He's going to get the start. Of course, the Irish have opt out after opt out. Quarterback's gone. Speaking of quarterbacks, Spencer Rattler for South Carolina, he thought about going into the NFL draft, but he will play in this game. Who knows what he's going to do? Who knows what anybody's going to do these days? But the thing is, this is a different game that we're seeing in the bowl game versus say if these teams had met, week 2, week 3, two totally different teams simply because of the opts out and the transfer portal.
Yeah. Notre Dame, they're both of their captains, tight end Mike Mayer and Isaiah Foskey. They're not going to play. South Carolina, starting tackle, Wanham, safety Reed, they're both starters. They're not going to play. And these lineups are going to look a great deal different than the regular season versions.
Going back and look over the regular season, which again, don't know how much that's going to mean in this game, but they both had big wins over top teams at the time. Notre Dame beat North Carolina, who was undefeated and ranked in right at the edge of the top 10 at that point in time, and then they beat Clemson, just to manhandle Clemson, and then South Carolina. Of course, they spoiled Tennessee's prospects for the playoffs and turned around and beat Clemson in their final regular season game. And the thing that and the thing that got me about both of these teams is that their offenses really got better over the course of the year. But a lot of times you see a lot of your improvement in your offense in the first 2-3 weeks, and that's kind of where you're going to stay. These two teams down the stretch, they improved dramatically on offense.
They both put up big numbers down the stretch. Last 6 games, Notre Dame's all 6 games went over the total. They were high scoring. They scored 27 or more in each of their last 7 games. South Carolina put up 31 on a good Clemson defense. They put up 63 on Tennessee. The numbers in this bowl game, South Carolina, they've covered 5 of their last 6 bowl games. They've covered 7 of 9 on a neutral site. But I'm going to lean to the Irish here. Coach, Gamecocks had those big wins over in-state Clemson and Tennessee. It's just it's hard to follow up another win after those.
Yeah. All right, well, let's move on to the New Year's Eve bowl games, and we'll start in Nashville with the Music City Bowl. Iowa and Kentucky. This is another Big Ten SEC matchup. Both these teams have 7-5 records. Iowa, they're down to their 3rd string quarterback, and Will Levis, the good Kentucky quarterback, has been solid, tough all year. He's opted out.
Yeah, I can't remember. I can't remember a game where a 3rd string quarterback will start, and the point spread moves from him being a 2.5-point dog to at one point a 2.5-point favorite. I mean, these bowl games are really difficult to read and handicap. The total in this game is 31. I mean, it's one of the lowest totals you're ever going to see in college football. Basically, the odds makers are looking for a 17-14 game.
Yeah, and I can't see Kentucky scoring a lot of points. I mean, Levis is gone, and Chris Rodriguez, the running back who was injured at the first of the year and got back in. Those are the 2 offensive juggernauts for the Wildcats. And also, think about it. You've got 2 coaches here that build their teams around defense.
No doubt about that. Kentucky's last 8 games all stayed under the total, but again, those totals weren't at 31. That 31 makes me look a little bit at the over at this point. I haven't decided. And we both know that Ferentz is going to ugly this game up and shorten it. That's what he does every week when he can. I lean to the Cats here getting the points just from the line flip.
Let's talk about the Sugar Bowl. Alabama and Kansas State. Of course, Kansas State, the Big 12 champion, knocked off TCU in the championship game. Alabama, the 3rd place team in the SEC. No opts out, though, for the Tide. Bryce Young and Will Anderson both will play.
Yeah, Bryce Young, he's Superman, but he's going to be running for cover more often than he was in the regular season. A depleted offensive line. The point spread in this game started Alabama -8. It went down to 3. When Young and Anderson announced they would play, it went back to 6.5.
Yeah, this Kansas State team, they're a well-coached football team. They play with a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of juice, as they say. And this Tide team, you and I both know in the past, Alabama has they haven't had the players to opt out, but they've opted out on the we lost that game because we weren't motivated. Well, I'll tell you what, they better get motivated for this Kansas State team. If not, they're going to be crying the same old song.
I play spots and situations, and this game means more to K-State than Alabama, period. Doesn't mean that K-State's going to win, but it is very similar to those Sugar Bowl losses that Alabama had to Oklahoma and Utah. And frankly, those games weren't even close.
All right, let's move on and talk about a couple of games that that hopefully that these teams are going to be motivated because they're playing for a chance to go win a national championship. The Fiesta Bowl, the Horned Frogs of TCU and the Wolverines of Michigan. Listen, TCU 12-1. You and I, we kind of said, oh, this is going to be the week that they fall all through the year. And we were wrong. Michigan coming in at 13-0. They got here last season, but, didn't end well for them. TCU, like I said, you and I doubted these folks all year. They lost in the Big 12 championship game. They still made it to the Final Four. I think they're deserving. I think based upon the resume of everyone else, they should be there. And also, let's remember, too, that they lost to a Kansas State team in the championship game that they beat during the regular season. But let's go back and remember this Kansas State team. Wonder how good they would have been had Adrian Martinez not gone down.
Yeah, good point. I was a doubter of TCU. I didn't think they would get here to the Final Four. They power rate low, but they beat the teams that were put in front of them. And you talked about Michigan. This is their second go-around in the playoffs. They got shellacked last year. No way of putting it. They destroyed Iowa in the Big Ten title game, and then Georgia just really handed it to them. They have a better draw this year. Not a knock on TCU. They're just not Georgia. And instead of being an underdog, Michigan's now favored from 7.5 to 8 points.
Let's look at a little history here over the college football playoffs. 16 semifinal games. And if we looked at only 3 of those were truly competitive and we'll say, decided by, less than 10 points. 9 of the 16, so over half of these semifinal games end up being blowouts of 3 touchdowns or more. Go ahead.
It's I factor that into the handicapping, but still, when you look at these games and try to handicap them, it's really tough. But it's not tough if you don't do a lot of work and just go with the favorites, because the favorites have been really taking care of business. As far as these two teams individually, they both have poor records in the postseason. Michigan's failed to cover 5 straight bowl games. TCU's only covered 3 of their last 10 bowl games. But again, they haven't been in a bowl game of this magnitude and ever. Yeah. I'm going to lean to under in this game, but it's not going to be a big play.
Yeah, TCU over the years they've had seasons where they've had an undefeated season after the bowl game, won the Rose Bowl, and of course Auburn and Oregon ended up playing in the national championship game that year. So they've always talked about, hey, the little guys, we don't get our chance. Well, here's your chance, TCU. Go and do it. Let's move on to the Peach Bowl. I think this is going to be the matchup of the day, Ohio State and Georgia. Of course, this is the prime time 8 p.m. Eastern game on ESPN. Buckeyes, after that Michigan game, no way that you would thought they would have ended up being in the playoffs. The defending Bulldogs, defending champs, they come in unbeaten at 13-0. No surprise there.
The saying of teams that reload and not rebuild fits this Georgia team perfectly. I mean, they lost talent to the NFL. They lost transfer portal kids, and they put the nation on notice right out of the gate. They walloped Oregon 49-3. Okay, and that Oregon team was in the top 10 up until the last couple of weeks. And only one time all year did Georgia play in a one-score game all year. That was in a 26-22 win at Missouri.
Yeah. Listen, the Buckeyes, they should give Kyle Whittingham and the Utes national championship rings if they win, because they wouldn't be here had USC beaten Utah in the Pac-12 championship game. But C.J. Stroud and company are here. You look at these two coaches, Kirby Smart, the kind of cute saying is, well, he's the new Nick Saban and Georgia's the new Alabama. And if you look at the blueprint, it's kind of hard to argue with that right now. Ryan Day, Jim Harbaugh came up with I say came up, he just used the great quote that's been used a lot of times that, some people are born on third base and act like they hit a triple. And he was referring to Ryan Day inheriting an Ohio State program that was loaded. And Ryan Day really, he hasn't won like Urban Meyer. He hasn't won like Jim Tressel. In other words, he hasn't won that national championship game. He got there one year and was embarrassed badly.
Yeah, was that in 20?
Yes.
Against Alabama, yeah.
Yes.
And, taking a look at this Ohio State team, when they play in the big games, excuse me, the last 16 times, Coach, they played a ranked opponent, they've only covered 3. So that means they're underperforming 3 out of 16 times when they play a ranked opponent. You mentioned all the blowouts in these semifinal games. We talked about that. Another thing to factor in is the Big Ten is 7-14-1 against the spread against SEC teams in bowl games. And I have to tell you, I know Georgia is a machine. I don't doubt that. But the intuitive thought here is Ohio State was left out, kind of like, or they were on the outside looking in, much like the Alabama 2017 team.
Yep.
They get new life. They're playing on found money. Okay. Yep. And I have a feeling that maybe Ohio State keeps it within the number here.
I think so. I think they come in and they can play loose, no pressure on them whatsoever. And, and I can tell you from experience, teams that are loose, teams that are relaxed, they play a lot better than teams that are wound up too tight.
Yeah, and that's go back to the pressure of November, right? That's why those teams fall to the pressure. They're the coaching staff, the players, they're all tight. They're in a position that a lot of times is outside of their comfort zone. And now Ohio State, hey, they're not supposed to be there a few weeks ago, and now they're here competing for a title.
Well, Mike, you have a good New Year's weekend, and we'll be back Monday morning. We'll review these games and take a quick look ahead at the national championship game, which we'll know who it's going to be by then.
Yep, I look forward to it.